Once you finish polishing all your blend shapes, now it's time to do some controls for them. Our rig is now working, but this is not friendly for animators. So let's work on a user interface that will make animators work a lot easier. I'm going to start creating a nerve circle. I'm going to move this, rotate, and I will try to have the shape of the head on this circle. So I'm going to actually have it here. I will add a lot of sections, probably to 20, and I'm going to scale this. So I want to have the shape of the head here. I am going to share with you this UI, so you don't need to make it from scratch, but it's always good to know how to do this kind of user interface in case you want to do 100% customized UI for you. So I'm gonna drop this down. I want to have exactly this shape, something like that, so it feels like this user interface is for this character. I'm going to move it to this side. I'm gonna do a modify freeze transformations. I will probably shape this a little bit more so this doesn't feel too sharp. And there it is. So this is going to be my user interface, and I'm going to have a lot of controls inside of this curve. I'm gonna name this as Face Master. Face Master control, and I'm going to do an offset. So an offset is a group with the same name, but with a suffix offset. I'm also going to change the color, so I'm going to go to drawing overrides, enable overrides. I'm gonna do this one yellow. And now let's create some layers for all these controls. I call these controls as borders or reference controls because we're not actually going to do something moving these controls. This is just for reference. So I am actually going to lock and hide all the attributes at the end. But first I'm going to do a layer for this. So I will click here, that is create layer. And I am going to name this layer as border controls, face UI border controls, or borders only. And I am going to add this control to this layer. So I need to select the control, then this layer, and click Add Selected Objects. Now, if I click here, I can control the visibility of all the controls on this layer, but most importantly, if I click to R, that is reference, if you click, you change the mode. So I will go to reference mode, and now I cannot select this control. I think I didn't add this correctly, so I'm going to do it again, Add Selected Objects. Now if you see, this is black. So I cannot select this control, and that's what I want, because I only want to select the controls that actually do something on my rig, that are the ones that I am going to create now. I'm going to create another layer for later that is going to be called Face UI Controls. So now we are going to create an actual control that is going to be a little bit different, but it's the same process. I'm going to create a square. This is going to define the limits of my controls. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. I'm going to start doing this for the mouth. And if you see, there's a group with 4 curves. That's how the square works on Maya. So I'm going to rename all these as left mouth UI borders, and I'm going to add these borders to the borders UI reference layer. So now I cannot select these controls neither, and that's good. So that's what I want. Now I'm going to create a curve here that is going to be a circle now. I'm going to move this circle inside of this square. So I'm going to actually scale this a lot, something like that. And I want to have this exactly at the center. So to have the exact center of this position, I can do a cluster. I will select all these curves for the square. Then I can go to rigging, deform, cluster. There is a cluster. So I can just match that translation of that cluster, and that's going to be exactly the center. I can delete now the cluster, and I will do a freeze transformations on my control. Freeze transformations. And this is going to be left mouth control. I am going to do an offset for this control too, just to keep a good practice. and I will match the pivot. So I have this control that I actually want to be limited to this section. So I want to be able to move this control, but I want to have this limit. I don't want to move more the control because this is going to define the limit. So these are the borders. That's why I call them borders. For that, I'm going to select my controls, go to the attribute editor, and I actually want my limits to be 1. It's a better practice to keep 1 as limit, 1 minus 1, and the same for the x-axis. So I'm going to click left mouse out control, then limit information, then there is translate. So I'm going to select x, y, x, y, and by default the max value is 1, minus value is 1. If you want more, you can click here whatever you want. Like for example, right now 1 is a lot too much. So I can actually put here 0.5. So here on y. So now the max attribute is 0.5. I cannot go any further because the limit is 0.5. But I actually want this to be 1. I'm gonna show you a technique to do this. I want my 1 to be exactly here. So I am going to scale the offset. That's why I did an offset that was on the same pivot than the control. So if I scale this to 0.5, now my limit is here. And the value here is 1 if you see. And it's the same for down, and it's the same for x. So now this control is limited by this border, or at least we're making that appearance. So I'm going to go to zeros. I don't care about the scale, doesn't matter. I am just going to leave it like that, but I will scale with vertex, control vertex, right click. I can scale a little bit more my control. Not with this scale, because I don't want to alter these scale attributes. And then I'm going to change the color of this control too. That's on the shape, enable overrides, and this is going to be yellow. So now I have this control, and this control is going to drive the blend shapes of the mouth. And now I will create the other type of controls that I'm going to use for this user interface. So this one is going to be used for all the axes, but there's a lot of controls in which we only want one axis. So I'm gonna create this kind of controls with a curve tool, EP curve tool. I'm going to make a line first as reference. So I'm going to use this line to drive the control. I'm going to name this as left in brow border. And I am also going to add this control to the border layer. So right click and add selected borders. And now this is also referenced, so I cannot select it. I can only select it from the outliner if you see, but I cannot select it on the UI, and that's what I want. So now I'm going to create a circle. We're going to do exactly the same. I can actually scale this if I want, like the control I mean. We can scale this more if you want more range on your control, but I'm gonna look for that later, not now. I'm gonna rotate 90 degrees this control just to have it this one here. And I also want to have the center of this curve, so I can actually just do a modify center pivot like that, and I can just do a match translation. And this is now at the center. I'm going to change the color of this shape. Now I'm going to rename this control to left brow and also do an offset with the same name, but offset suffix. And I am going to do a freeze transformation. And I also want to match the pivot of my offset to my control. So I select the offset, then the control, and match pivots. So there it is. Also remember to clear this history. So I'm actually going to select these two controls, or all the controls if they have history. And I can go to edit, delete by type, history. And now I want to do the same. So if I click here on reference mode, now I cannot select those borders, but I want to limit this control to this border. So I'm going to go to my control, limit information, translate, and I want to activate this for Y only, because I will not want to move on X this control. Right now the limit is 1, so it's a little bit further than what I want. I want this to finish here, so I'm going to use the same technique that I did with the last control. I'm going to scale this to 0.5, and there it is. I cannot see very well this line because of my grid, so I'm gonna hide my grid here, and now we can see that. I'm going to scale this control, and there it is. So now I have this control limited by this line, and this -1 and this 1. And now I want to clear all the attributes that I'm not going to use. So on this control I am only going to use Y. So I'm going to select all these attributes, right click, lock and hide selected. So that way I cannot move this to X or to any other axis. I cannot rotate and scale. And I'm going to do the same for this control. On this one I want to move on X and Y, so I'm gonna lock and hide all the other ones. And now I can just move it on that axis, I cannot move it on Z, and I cannot rotate and scale. So basically what I'm going to do now is just to group this as left brow in UI. And now what I'm going to do is basically just duplicate these once and once again to make this for the 3 controls of the brows. And then I'm going to duplicate the mouth. Probably I'm gonna do a -1 here on X, so this works as inversed. You don't need to do that, but I think it's better to do that. I'm gonna do that later. I'm gonna show you how to do the mirror. So I'm just going to duplicate these interfaces to do the whole interface of my face. And I just finished the left side of the controls of my face. As you can see here, they are grouped by sections, just as we group our blend shapes as mouth, nose, brows, and eyelids. So I did the same for our controls. So now I will mirror to the right side. So I will select all my controls. I will click Ctrl D to make a duplicate. Now I will click Ctrl G to make a group. And then I will scale to -1 on X, so it goes to the other side. In this case, the pivot was at the origin, so it didn't work. I need to have the pivot of this group on the center of my user interface, so I'm gonna match the pivot to this center control that I know that is at the center. So match pivot. And now I'm going to do a -1 on scale X, and now we have the opposite direction. As you can see, this allowed us to work the rig as mirror. So if I move in X, the controls move on opposite directions. And this is good for animators in a lot of cases. This works when we have object mode on our tool settings, and when we have the world mode, it works as maybe we would expect. They move to the same side. So we want to give this extra option to the animator to work on object and to be able to work his poses with mirror. Now I am going to rename all these extra controls. I'm going to change L for R, so I will change the prefix. So I will replace L for R, apply, and now we have all our right side controls named, and I am just now going to group them to have a better order. And I just created these 2 lines here to divide the eyelid section, so I think it's easier for animators to read. This is brows, eyelids, up cheeks, nose, and mouth and cheeks. And now I am going to connect all these blend shapes we have here to these controls. For that, I am going to start creating a new camera for my facial user interface. So I'm going to click Panel, Orthographic, New, and I will click Front Camera. So this will create a new front camera that I'm going to rename Facial UI Camera. And this is going to be placed here. So now I can click Panel, Tier of Copy, and I have a new copy for this camera here, in which I can do something like that. I can also move my camera, and I can parent this camera to our facial UI control. So I'm gonna parent this camera here. And now if I move this control or this group, the camera is going to move with it. As you can see, I have here my camera. And if I go to my perspective view here, I can just move my camera here, and I don't see any change here. So I can position this wherever I want, and it will not be affected here. So I will parent this user interface to my head. Now it's on the head control, and I can rotate my head, and this camera is not going to be modified. So that's ideally for these kinds of UIs. And another thing that you can do if you don't want to be moving your camera here is that you can lock the attributes of your camera. So I can go to my camera, I'm gonna select it, that is this one, and I will lock all the attributes. I will select all the attributes, and I will click lock selected, and now I cannot move my camera from this area. I can just zoom in and zoom out. So I have here my face, my user interface, and my blend shapes, and let's start connecting everything. There are different ways to connect controls to blend shapes, and I am going to use the set driving keys technique that I think that it's the most flexible and the easiest one. So I will click animation, then key, set driving key, and I will click set. What this method does is to connect an object to another object. So basically, there's one driver object that in this case is going to be our control, and there is going to be a driven object or attribute that is going to be our blend shapes. For that, I am going to select the face, and then I'm going to select main face blend shape here, so it's the node that has all our blend shapes, and I am going to load it as a driven, so I will click load driven. Now I will click that main face blend shapes, that is this node that we have here, so I want to drive these nodes of blend shapes. And now I am going to select the driver. I am going to start with the mouth, so I am going to select this control, the left mouth control, and I am going to load it as a driver. Now, our driver is the left mouth control, and our driven is the main blend shape. But we need to select which blend shape we are going to drive. In this case, it is going to be the left out shape, that is this one. And on the control is going to be the x-axis. I am going to mark a key here, so I am going to click key. Now our blend shape is blue. That means that there is a connection there. So what I did is that I marked this key. When left mouth control translate x is on 0, I want this attribute to be 0. But when this left mouth control is 1, I want this blend shape to be 1. So I'm going to make another key. And now I have this connection. When I move this control, the blend shape turns on. I'm going to do the same, but now for the in. So it's this one, left mouth in shape, and I am going to mark a key here. Now our left mouth in shape is blue, and I want that when this control on X is on -1, I want the left mouth in shape to be 1. So I'm going to mark another key. Now I have this movement. I will do the same for the y-axis. So for that, I will change the driver attribute here to y, and I will change my driven to left mouth up. I will mark a key. Now my left mouth up is blue, so when this one is 1 on y, I want my left mouth up to be 1 too, and I am going to mark another key. And now I have this movement with this control. I want to do the same for the down blend shape, so I will now select the left mouth down shape, and I'm going to mark another key. Now I will move my control down, so it's -1, and when my control is -1, I want my left down shape to be 1, and I'm going to mark another key. Now, when I move this control, I have all these blend shapes turning on and off at the same time, if you see. You can see all the movement here and the movement here, and this is very organic for an animator to work. To finalize this process, I am going to select the face, then I will go to my window, animation editor, graph editor, and we can actually see the curves here. So I can see all the set driving keys that are here. There's 2 set driving keys for the left mouth control translate Y, and 2 for the translate X. And what I want to do with all the blend shapes is to make them linear. So you will click here. Now this is a little bit more organic. Now I want to connect this control to my lip blend shape. But I want that when this control is on -1, I want this blend shape to also go on -1. So for that, I am going to do a direct connection instead of a side driving key. Both setups works, but for this one, I think that a direct connection is faster. So for that, I am going to open my connection editor on Windows, General Editor, Connection Editor. That works a little bit different than the side driving key. On a side driving key, you can actually customize the value you want on each control. And for a direct connection, it's just direct as it is. If the control is 0, the driven is going to be 0. If it's 1, it's going to be 1. So I'm going to load this as a driver. Here is on the left side is a driver, and on the right side is going to be the driven, that in this case is going to be the same node, and is here on weights. We can see all the blend shapes. So I want to connect that translate Y to the left up lip shape. That is left up lip shape. So now this is yellow because this is a direct connection, and when I move this control, my lip moves too. I will do the same for the lower one and for the right side. I'm going to connect the translate Y now to the left down lip shape, that is somewhere there too, and this one is here. So now I just connected these two controls directly. If you see, this works at the opposite direction, so I'm going to do a little trick on these ones. Because I want when this goes up, I want to have the lips go up, and when this goes down, it's down. So I'm going to actually select these two. I will click my up arrow. This will select the group. So I want to select the top group of these controls, and I am going to do a scale on Y to -1, and this will now work at the opposite side. So when I move these two like that, they open and they close. I will now connect the right side, but I'm going to skip that. There it is. So basically, it is good to use direct connections when you want a 1 and -1 value on the same blend shape. And I also use a driving keys when I only want a blend shape to work on 0 to 1, and then I want another blend shape to work on 0 to -1. And I finished connecting most of the controls. I will show you what I did. So I connected these controls to the master of the browse. As you can see, there's the left up master shapes, and when I go down, there are the left brow down master shapes. So it's been influenced by these ones. Then I connected the mid brow on the sides for this one. So it's actually these two. As you remember, we did two blend shapes to drive the center of the brow on X. I connected there. And then individually, I just connected our blend shapes that we weighted. So it's the in here, and then there's the mid, and the out blend shapes. And I also did the in shape here. So if you select all these together, you can go down and up, and then you can also modify this. So this was all done with side driving keys, except for this one that was done with direct connections. That's why it is yellow. I also connected the up cheeks here with direct connections, the cheeks here, and as we saw, there's the lips and the mouth here. I am just missing the eyelids. For now, I just connected this one to open and close. Same for the bottom one. But I want to show you how I am going to connect all the other blend shapes we did on this one, so you can see why we did all that process. So I will drive this blend shape, and the main idea is that this blend shape on X is going to drive all our weighted blend shapes, like these ones. As you remember, we divide this in two, so when this control drives to this direction, this blend shape is going to be on, and also the out blend shape is going to be on, but on the opposite direction. So if the in blend shape is closing, I want the out blend shape to be opening. So it's this one, I want this to be on. So I want these two blend shapes to work together. And the same when I go to the other side, I want the opposite movement. So I want to close this and to open the in. So these guys are going to work together. So I'm going to connect that to this control, and I will do the same then with the low and with the right side. And now let's make this into side driving keys. So this is going to be my driver on translate X. And I will want to drive close in and open out. I will make a key. So when this goes on -1, there is -1 on X. I want to activate this. So I want to close the inner side and I want to open the outer side. And I will make a key. I will now do the opposite on the other direction. So I will grab the close out and open in. There are these two. We'll make a key. So when this turns on, I want the inner side to be open and I want the outer side to be closed. And I will make a key. So now I have a lot of range with this movement, as you can see. And with up and down, these make a lot of variance for animators. So you can do a lot of shapes with this system. Once you finish all your blend shapes, remember to select your geometry, window, animation, graph editor, and to select all the curves and change them to linear. That way the movement will feel more organic. I will do the same for the lower lid and for the right side, but I'm gonna skip that process. And I finished doing the right side of the eyelids. Now everything is working. I finished connecting all the blend shapes. So you can add as many controls as you want, as many blend shapes as you want. I will probably add one more here at the center, but I'm gonna do that on my free time. So I'm gonna duplicate another of these to drive the mouth up, down, and to the sides. And we're also missing the jaw, but we're going to connect that one on the next lesson.